Good evening, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Cover One Film Room, part, of course, of the Cover One Sports Network. I'm one of your three hosts, Anthony Prohaska, joined by Erik Turner and Kendall Mirsky. Guys, this is the first time in a while that we've had back-to-back episodes with all three of us. Erik, you've been able to stay. Yeah, consistency. That's what we're building upon right now. You know, Erik, your schedule has thinned out a little bit. Kendall decided not to betray us like he did 2 weeks ago. And so we're all here together. And it's a fun episode, this episode, talking about Mr. Dawson Knox, somebody who is on the forefront of the minds of Bills Mafia as he is an unrestricted free agent next year. So this is a very big year for him in terms of a contract, but also in terms of building upon last year, a successful 2021 in multiple ways and in multiple regards, which we're going to dive into tonight. His receiving ability, his releases off the line of scrimmage, his route running, his blocking, anything and everything when it comes to Dawson Knox. We're going to dive into the game tape tonight and break that down for everybody that's here watching live and anybody that's watching later and stumbles upon this episode. But before we get into tracking the development and the progression of Mr. Dawson Knox, we wanted to talk about some mandatory minicamp stuff. This is kind of the last, as we were talking offline before this episode started, this is kind of the last gasp of like official stuff before there's that real off-season lull and nothing happens for the next like month. So we've got mandatory minicamp today, Tuesday, June 14th, tomorrow, and then Thursday. And we've seen some pressers today. We saw some footage. Erik, we'll start with you. What today, you know, in day one of mandatory minicamp, did anything really stand out to you? What kind of clicked for you or something that you wanted to focus on?
Yeah, two things, and we're going to talk about it here in a minute. First was the presser for Von Miller, and he talking about his adjustment and the to the team and, you know, the players and coaches around the team. And he was asked several times about the pass rush summit, which we're going to talk about, and how, you know, the guys that went there, AJ Epinesa, Boogie Basham, and Gregory Rousseau went down there, and how, you know, he created that camp and that summit to really share information. And it's kind of funny because, like, you know, we watch a lot of film and we break down a lot of plays, and people are like, you guys are giving away information to the opponents, but they don't, you know, people don't realize that, like, coaches, you know, players, they share this information. Everyone is running the same thing, right, guys? It's just in their own ways. They're presenting it differently. So, you know, the stuff we do in the film room and break down plays like we're going to do tonight, we're not giving away information. When you know, when they have those type of summits and QB summits and pass rush summits and clinics and coaches clinics, cool clinics like we've done before and talked about, this information is being shared. And one of the things that, you know, Von Miller talked about was how success leaves clues. And I just thought that was a cool way to put things. And I think it's something that we should talk about right now, man.
Yeah, I love that quote that you pulled from Von Miller. And also to hit on the other piece, I still think of that a little bit whenever I'm watching like coaches in a conference room break it down, like, well, this is how we play our defense. In the back of my mind, I'm always like, what if one of your opponents is in there just studying everything you're doing? Like, yeah, it's funny to get that out of your brain. But yeah, that clip from Von Miller was tremendous. And, you know, it's something that I think is really cool because, you know, this whole success leaves clues. Yeah. It makes sense. Like, you put those breadcrumbs together of how people won, and whether you're listening to it and having it being told to you, or you're studying it in the playbook and the diagram, or you're watching it on film, you're able to piece those clues together in order to put the whole, you know, solve the whole case and figure out, well, like, okay, why does this guy keep winning? And you take all those clues, you piece them together, and then you get the end result of that consistent, sustainable success.
Yeah, I mean, think about how like it impacted Josh Allen even in the past 2 years. You think about how he succeeded in 2020 and how much of that goes on to tape and how much people are studying that game after game, seeing why he's succeeding in those games in 2020 and then seeing those extrapolated to 2021. Those are clues for defenses on how to stop Josh Allen. We saw moments of defenses kind of honing in on how to stop Josh Allen, but then you see it's pivot. How are you going to pivot off of that? How are you going to right the ship off of what the defense is doing? This game is built off counterpunching. That is what football is.
Yeah, let's jump into a few seconds from this presser from Von Miller talking about, again, how success leaves clues.
And Greg, we all went to the pass rush summit. And, you know, I call it the summit I call it the summit and not the clinic because it's not a place where I go and I just, everybody listen to Von. It's a summit of all the great players in the league, all the great pass rushers in the league. And it's just a space that I created that we all make go, and I've always been a fan of just being around great players, being around great talent, and success leaves clues. And we have a lot of successful pass rushers there, the Pass Rush Summit, Chandler Jones, Max Crosby, all these guys, Justin Houston, all these guys came. And I just feel like success leaves clues. And whenever you get complacent, I feel like that's when you go downhill. Each and every year I try to learn something. It doesn't matter if I got 200 sacks. I'm trying to get 201 sacks. So,
yeah, I just that quote right there just blew me away. I was doing something with the kids, and then I heard that. I was like, whoa, like that. Type of self-awareness, understanding that, hey, he's a future Hall of Famer, and he's trying to improve every year. He's trying to study the Max Crosby's, the Chandler Jones, the guys that have success year in and year out, and take parts of their game and things they do, how they set up offensive tackles. That is why he's a future Hall of Famer. That's why the Bills brought him in and paid him, obviously a really lucrative contract. And, as fans, all we can do is hope that, those young pass rushers can soak up that mentality and some of those things that they learned at the summit.
It's funny. I saw several clips from the summit, and two that really stuck out for me in relation to Von Miller were Chandler Jones and Max Crosby, and they were each talking. They were, doing what they do in the summit there. Like they had somebody in front of them and they were diagramming, diagnosing, like, okay, like here's how I like to attack, and I like to set up this move, and I'll do this, which leads to this later. And Von was in the background of the camera, and he was straight sitting there and like focused, like watching. Yeah. He wasn't like kind of dicking around or not paying attention or being like, well, this is my summit, so whatever. Like he was focused and locked in. And the whole success leaves clues thing, it makes sense for him. And it's also, I think, applicable to part of the cyclical nature of the NFL. It's the reason why you see so many teams pick up on things like the West Coast offense hit and was so successful. And everybody's like, oh, we got to do some of that, or the Tampa 2 defense, or the Seattle cover 3, or now we're seeing more, more 2 high looks and light boxes and gap and a half and stuff like that. When teams and coaches and players start to see what has worked and they start to see what success is, they start to pull at those clues a little bit and try and piece together themselves. And I think that goes in hand with part of that cyclical nature you see from the individual level, but also from a team or holistic level at the NFL or football in general, because teams and players and coaches see what works and they try to emulate it.
Yeah, that's what's really exciting about the whole thing. I mean, it is a copycat league, and getting guys like that can pull parts from other people's game, then apply them to their own and kind of create a holistic pass rush repertoire. But what's really exciting about this, like on an individual level to the Bills, is obviously the lasting impact that Von Miller could have on the young guys that are currently on the roster when he's not even on the Bills anymore. And that's obviously, like you just did, and like fingers crossed, that is the hope. That really is. That's the hope from this whole thing. We're paying Von Miller, 3 years, but it's a 6-year deal. Who knows if he's going to see through all 6 years, but when he's not here in Buffalo, the hope is he had a lasting impact on those young guys.
Yeah. And that's been something that we've talked about all offseason. We talked about it, Kendall, when you and I kind of broke that news when it happened, like 6 minutes before we went live on this guy's coverage, which threw us for a tailspin. That was wild. It was insane. Our phones were going off left and right, and everybody was in the chat freaking out. Like, it was nuts. That was part of that piece, right? Like the on-field impact, but the off-the-field impact. Exactly. Like, what does he do in helping Gregory Rousseau and AJ Epinesa and Carlos Basham and Ed Oliver and anybody else, not even on the defensive line? Like, how does he impact other players in terms of teaching them how to be a professional and hone their craft? You could be Dane Jackson or Kyer Elam. You're not an edge rusher, but you see the way Von Miller approaches the game every day, and maybe you're like, you know what? I need to approach the game like that. I mean,
also think about it tangibly, like that way he could impact Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown, like just going up against them every day in practice and teaching them like, oh, this is what works against me. If you ever see someone with a similar build, similar archetype to me, this could work against that. Those kind of little things. It doesn't even go, like you said, to that defensive end group. It's holistically to the team.
Yeah, and even to the little things too. Like if Von is going against Deion a lot in practice, and he's like, you know what? Like, I keep beating you like this because you're tipping this.
Right.
Like you're doing this and it's allowing me to take advantage of that and do this and that. And you start to pick up little tricks like that.
And that's the thing, these veterans like Von Miller, they're able to articulate the game.
Yes.
Not every player is able to do that, especially young players. Young players are just, again, kind of living off of their athleticism and their success in college and have to relearn the game in many ways when they get to the NFL level. So guys like Von Miller don't come around often, obviously, but especially in regards to being able to articulate the game and teach it to other guys. That's why a lot of people are like, as soon as he retires, he could easily be a coach because he's able to articulate and teach and convey what he's seeing, what he saw, his experience, but also how to counter and beat opposing offensive linemen in the league.
Yeah, that's so funny about that. I remember being little and I used to always think like, well, the best players are going to make the best coaches because they were so good at the game that they should just coach the game.
Not always.
Correct. Like that ability to articulate combined with, sometimes if you are that great of a player, right, you might have intangibles or you might do things that just make it easy for you and you can't teach someone that, or you can't articulate it, or even if you can teach it, you can't articulate it or vice versa. He's got that. He knows ball so much and he's worked so hard to hone his craft that he's able to teach and, pass this knowledge on. And that's something, again, Kendall, like you said, like something that could live on when Von Miller is gone, with this team. And then those players will pass it on and so on and so forth. It's something that could have a resounding impact and positive ripple effect on this team. And, that was a highlight from the defensive side of the ball. And we wanted to talk about a bit of the offense from day one of mandatory minicamp, and something that hit me last week. I said it on Disguised Coverage when going over OTAs last week. Tavon Austin's interview was my favorite interview from last week. And one of the things he talked about in that interview was how smart you have to be successful in the Buffalo Bills offense. He talked about, as a receiver, how many possible options you have on any given play, the multitude of positions you can end up in, because so much of this offense is based on reading what's going on in front of you, reading the coverage, leveraging space, and then building your route and your stem off of what you're seeing in front of you, which also makes life, harder-ish. And why Josh Allen is so important, because he has to see the same thing that you're seeing at that same time. That's where rapport and chemistry and all that kind of stuff comes in. But it was really cool to see Tavon Austin talk about this Bills offense. He said it's the most complicated offense he's ever been in because of how many possibilities and options that you have on any given snap based on what you're seeing in front of you and then reading it accordingly. And, Erik, you've done a really good job here teeing up a small example of that from day one of mandatory minicamp.
Yeah, this is from our buddy Sal Capaccio. He posted a little thread on his Twitter timeline about, just guys going through drills. And you see Josh Allen throwing to Gabriel Davis on the left side of the screen here. But this is kind of plays right into what you're talking about, what Tavon Austin said about how the offense is, pretty difficult. And there's a lot of reading going on. There's not many routes in this offense that are locked routes where, okay, you're just running a go route. A lot of the times you're changing post snap that as the picture changes, as the coverage changes, your route's going to change. And it's not just a coverage. It's also reading the leverage of the defender. You have that type of freedom in this offense. So you see Gabriel Davis running vertically right now, up the field, up the numbers, and he's breaking out. It looks like he's going to run an out route. But then you'll see him, he slips here, but you'll see him kind of hook it up just outside the numbers. But as, Josh throws it, and now he goes to the other side. Now watch the route that the receiver on that side of the field is running. It looks very similar. You see Diggs going up the numbers. You see him reading the leverage of this coach right here, who I assume is a wide receiver coach. You see him read his leverage. He's playing tight to the numbers, almost like the divider line in the cover 3 look. And what is Diggs doing? He's running an out route. So now he's just going to break it off. So again, reading the leverage, reading the coverage, that's what makes this offense so difficult to defend. But it's also why it's so difficult for especially guys that are just coming in this year that haven't been in the system for many years, make it so difficult to, transition to.
Yeah, Kendall, what are your thoughts on how, we talk about the Bills defense in terms of how it's more simplistic and more vanilla, but because the defenders are so good at their role and knowing what each other is supposed to do, it makes it hard to beat that simplicity or that vanilla aspect that the defense has. On the offense, it's a bit of the opposite. There are multiple levels and layers and dynamics to what's going on in any given play. Anytime you see a simple, hitch on 3rd and 5. It's not just like, oh yeah, like, Cole Beasley ran 5 yards and he sat. Like there's levels and layers to it. What do you think about that aspect of the offense and in terms of what it means for new players coming in and guys having to get adjusted to life on this team?
It's funny because it is similar in regards to offense and defense, where you're asking guys to be high-level intelligence players. Like on both sides of the ball, if you're simple or you're complex on offense or defense, you need to be really good with your processing skills if you want your guy to be in the right spot and you want everyone to be on the same page. But I think you guys hammered it home really, really well in terms of, okay, this could make things a lot easier for Josh Allen on the back end, but it relies a lot on everyone being on the same page, and it makes things more difficult. And this goes back to the idea that we were talking about, Ant, during draft season, and why it's so hard for wide receivers to be so good off rip, like right when they get in the league, like how good Justin Jefferson was right off the bat.
And
It's
Jamar
not
Chase.
easy. Yeah, it's not easy
Unreal.
to do because there is a lot of reading and processing that you have to do, and being on the same page, building the chemistry. I guess that's less of the case for Jamar Chase since that was his college quarterback. But either way, like you have to build that chemistry, that trust that you're both seeing the same thing at the same time. And that's why I think all three of us think very highly of Khalil Shakir, but it's going to take him a little bit of time to really wrap his head around all of this and see the same thing that Josh Allen is seeing at the same time that Josh Allen is seeing it.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. And Erik, you brought a visual aid to help drill this point home. Fantastic. Let us know.
That's what this show is all about. Visual aid. That's how I learned. So you saw those 2 routes from Gabriel Davis and Stephon Diggs. Now, if you look at the 4th box down, it's called a read route in the old Patriots playbook here. You can see them. They're getting to 6 yards, and then they're doing one of 2 things. They're either breaking out at 6 yards or they're hooking it up. And what it reads is in the coaching point is stem to 6 yards. At the top of the stem, you must break out or turn out and sit. So a turn out and sit is what Gabriel Davis was doing. And obviously a breakout was what Diggs did. So versus zone, they're told to turn out and sit. Versus man to man, the wide receiver is going to be breaking out towards the sideline off his inside foot. Some of the other coaching points in the bottom there: have patience on the release. In option release there at the end there, it says if the flat is unoccupied, which kind of like what you saw with Diggs there, take it. The other coaching point is alert for trap corner, no wider than inside edge of the numbers. And it's just little coaching points that they throw in the playbooks to have. Obviously the receivers have to learn, they have to learn these things, what to see, what to look for, what foot to break off of, all little details that, a lot of these, again, young receivers, guys that are transitioning into this offense, like Tavon Austin, they're going to have to learn all these things if they want to perform at a high level, because as we talked about at the top, the Bills have been in this offense for many years now. Josh Allen has been in this offense for many years now, and he knows this offense like the back of his hand, and he needs you to keep up with him as a wide receiver.
Yeah.
And that's a huge responsibility. Like if you're not where the quarterback expects you to be, 1, you're probably not going to stay on the field. But 2, you're going to be a letdown and a vulnerability in that play. And I love how just that aspect, right? Like all 3 of us appreciate the complexities of football. And that's why at times, like I just laugh when you see certain things, like if a guy runs the wrong route or there's an overthrow and someone's like, oh, the guy sucks. Do you realize how complicated, like just that one thing you saw is? That's why, like, I laugh even more. Like, what goes into just a simple round, let alone something ultra complicated like run fits and gap exchanges on defense, which God knows, like, I feel like the casual fan doesn't get and doesn't understand. And there's so much nuance to everything that is done at the NFL. When you see someone just run 6 yards and sit, they probably had a multitude of possibilities on that play. There were multiple keys for them to read on that play. And then not to mention, there were multiple reads and keys for them on that play. The quarterback has to also know those multiple reads and keys, and then he has to read that same key at the same time of that wide receiver, and their timing has to be great. And the offensive line has to hold up their blocking, and there has to be a lane open in the passing window, and just all of these things that have to work just right for the most simplistic thing to happen. That's why football is such a beautiful game, because there's so many complexities and so many intricacies to it that even the simplest thing, you're just like, oh, nice. Like we hear it all the time, right? On TV, when you see like nice pitch and catch, simple pitch and catch. It was not simple. It was not simple. It was, there's so much to it. And, you know, there's also so much to the game of Dawson Knox this year. I'm going to pat myself on the back for that segue. I'm really proud of it. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Here. And to lead in with that, Mr. Nate Geary of WGR, a friend of the show, friend of Cover One, friend of Erik Turner. Yeah. He posted a really cool tweet today and came out and actually, you know, Erik, because this was your idea to cue this up, you know, you tee it up and let the good people know what this tweet says and what it's all about.
Yeah, just a lead in for, you know, the Dawson Knox development discussion. And obviously, like a lot of the foundational players that the Bills have drafted over the last few years are getting their contracts, and Gabriel Davis and Dawson Knox and Tremaine Edmonds are guys who's obviously are on the verge of getting those contracts. And so he put up a poll today, and I actually responded with Davis. So he says, let's say Dawson Knox and Gabriel Davis have breakout seasons. Knox leads all tight ends in touchdowns, career high in yards and catches. Davis has 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns. Who would you rather sign long-term? I responded with Davis, but as you guys can see, it's pretty close between the two of them. But I'll throw it to you, Ant, and then get your thoughts, Kendall. Who would you guys pick and why?
I'm a big fan of chess pieces. And so in a normal situation, if I could have a chess piece tight end versus a really good wide receiver, I would lean chess piece tight end. I just think the opportunity to have someone who can function in the run game as a blocker, but then also function as a receiver, who can be lined up in multiple places, do multiple things. It gives you, again, that chess piece on offense. It allows you to have, you know, to dictate matchups and really kind of set things for yourself on offense. It was part of the reason why that Patriots offense with Gronk and Aaron Hernandez was so dangerous, because you had two tight ends who could function in the run game, but also in the pass. And there's just a lot to it. In this instance, though, what's tough, Gabriel Davis is also a bit of a chess piece, because he can line up in multiple spots. He's got size. He can block. He can win and get vertical versus single high, two high. If we're defining breakout years, if Dawson Knox elevates his game to say he's a top 5 tight end in the league, I will take Dawson Knox, because I think it's easier to find a good wide receiver than it is a chess piece tight end. But if we're defining it just off the metrics that Nate gave, I would pick Gabriel Davis, because I think he does have a lot of chess piece nature to his game and what you can do. We saw it a lot down the stretch last year, right? You know, putting him in short motion and having him crack down on edges or second level defenders or dig out safeties, and then giving that exact same look and go and play action and gouging teams for 20 yards a pop. Like, he offers you a lot in that area, and Knox does as well. But, you know, based on how we're defining it on Nate's parameters, I'd go Davis. But if Knox elevates his game to where he solidifies it as he's a top 5 tight end in this league, I would leave Knox.
And you hammered my point that really swung me towards Knox. The main reason is just, Jason just hit it too, it takes longer to develop tight ends. It's hard. It's hard to find good tight ends. And we don't know if we necessarily have a bona fide, like, you know, for the foreseeable future, top 5, top 7 range tight end. I think we're trending in that direction. But yeah, obviously, pending the tweet, if all pans out and they both have breakout seasons relative to what they've done, I think I'm leaning towards Dawson Knox, even though I think the better player might be Gabe Davis. And it's because of the position. It's strictly
positional value.
It's strictly because of the position. And with the influx of youth talent to the wide receiver position and how much wide receivers get to practice with 7v7s growing among the nation and all that stuff, there's just so, like, since like 2016, the wide receiver classes have been absolutely insane. They get deeper and deeper every single year. So I'm not saying you're going to find one every single year, but I think your probability of finding one that's at least sufficient has gone up. So I think it's just from that regard, I think it's easier to bank on having that tight end that's already in house than, you know, hoping that what do you want?
I have a question for you. I was just going to leave it up until you're done with your point.
I was too distracted. I was way too distracted.
Is there a fly? Is there a bee in there?
Because this is something I've thought of as well with the amount of elite camps and all the emphasis you see on the passing aspect in football going down to the youth, like you see like elite camps and 7-on-7 happen for like 9-year-olds now, like it's everywhere.
Exactly,
it's super prevalent. Do you think, and this is for both of you guys, I'll just start with Kendall because he was already, talking about it. Do you think the Justin Jeffersons and the Jamar Chases of the world start to become more regular, where there's one every couple of years in the NFL as we move forward? Because again, we traditionally have not seen rookie receivers make a tremendous impact like we have aside from those two. You get one every handful of years, but it's rare. Do you guys think that becomes more of the norm as we go forward with what's happening down at the youth level and in college and high school and all that? Or do you still think those guys are unicorns in terms of what they've done?
I think it's both. I think they're still unicorns. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, you're like, it's tough to shoot for that.
Yeah.
But I do agree that we're going to see it more and more often. Because even the guys that didn't hit, like the Jerry Judys, the CeeDee Lambs, like they hit, but they didn't hit as hard as Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase did. So I think it's just going to be something we're going to have to be used to at this point. There's just going to be better talent at that position, but finding like that bona fide stud, maybe one every like 3-4 years,
which would still be an increase.
Exactly. Right. So yeah, that's ultimately why I lean towards Dawson Knox in this question.
Yeah, I think that poll and the results of it right now, I think it's exactly where it should be. It's tough.
Yeah.
But it also comes down to me where the defensive side of the ball it starts to trend towards. Because we're seeing a lot of those too high looks, right? Are the offense going to start to counter with heavier sets and stacking the box more, going to more of that power run game? Like there's that. It's cyclical, right, guys?
Yes,
the game is cyclical. Concepts, strategies, they all come back around, just like fashion, right? So I'd like to say that yes, your points about Dawson Knox are on point, and I think that it's completely fair, everything that you guys mentioned. I just like Davis because of his impact, not as a starter. So now that he's getting those first team reps, which Dawson Knox has had since he's pretty much been in the league, and we've seen what Davis could do. If he blows up, I mean, what does that say about Davis? Right. Is he on Diggs's level? If he blows up like those numbers that Gary put out, because Davis is already putting up some really good numbers, especially when we're talking touchdowns. Yeah. And as a third or fourth wide receiver, who's not playing full-time reps. So if he blows up as a number 2 wide receiver, it's going to be hard for me with how multidimensional he is as a receiver, which a lot, you talked about the passing camps, all that stuff's nice and dandy, but can they block like Gabriel Davis?
Right.
Can they play that quasi tight end role in the box, off the tackle and do a lot of the things that Dawson Knox can? I would argue that Gabriel Davis's blocking for the wide receivers is more impactful than Dawson Knox's blocking has been for the tight end group. And so I think
that's fair.
I think Gabriel Davis has been doing that since day one. Yeah. Dawson Knox has been trending to get to where he's at. Davis did that from day one. So that impact is pretty big if we're talking about how defenses may shift, with those two high coverages. So that, I think that was an awesome poll from Nate Geary.
Yeah, it goes to show how great that poll was, because it really got us talking there about how close it truly is, and we all just talked out of both sides of our mouth on that one.
Yeah, no doubt.
Here's another piece too, right? Like the monetary piece. So right now, per Spot Track.
Oh boy, not the tight end contracts.
Dawson Knox's right now, his perceived market value is 4 years, $49.785 million, which comes out to an average annual value of 12.44. That would put him as tight end number 7 for pay. He'd be around the group of Dallas Goedert, who's at an average annual value of 14.2, David Njoku, who's at 14.187, Mark Andrews, who's at 14, and Jonnu Smith, who is at 12.5. So a pretty good class of tight ends overall, roughly. But again, so that average annual value, what his market value is right now, 12.44. That's tight. That would be tight end 7. An average annual value at wide receiver of 12.4, we'll say 12.5 for the sake of this number, would be good for wide receiver 23. Corey Davis has an average annual value of 12.5. Chris Godwin at wide receiver 11 in terms of average annual value, the 11th highest paid wide receiver, has an average annual value of $20 million, which is an $8 million difference versus what Dawson Knox's perceived average annual value is. That also has to come into play, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's the drop off in value at the position and the contractual piece? Like Dawson Knox blowing up and getting paid, if they both blow up, a blow up Dawson Knox contract is probably significantly less than a blow up Gabriel Davis contract because of no disrespect to players, but look what Christian Kirk and Zay Jones got. Christian Kirk got 4 years, $72 million with over $30 million guaranteed. And, you know, maybe make the case that's what the Jags had to pay because of the Jags, but still wide receivers get paid on that open market big time.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I brought up some of Dawson Knox's stats from last year. And you mentioned David Njoku and that contract and what he got. And if you're looking at even just Knox's stats last year, look at each, just yardage per game. Like, it's not like he's breaking 75, 80 yards a game, 100 yards a game. He's got 11 touchdowns, but 6 of those touchdowns, 6 of 11 touchdowns were in the red zone, which we know Brian Dable loves, love to scheme up tight end touchdowns in the red zone. I mean, he was getting everybody touchdowns down there. But again, it's the impact. I mean, those numbers aren't crazy. He had a couple big games, don't get me wrong, but he still finished with 56 receptions for 685 yards. But those 11 touchdowns are what really stand out. So I know it's just statistics, but yes, the contracts, it's gonna play a factor when it comes to the position. And I can't wait to see what. I mean, it's a great problem to have, right? And I just can't wait to see what Brandon Beane, how he justifies signing, what guys he signs and what ones he doesn't, because he's got a really tough job over the next couple of years.
And these are the type of decisions that go into making a franchise sustainable when you've got those players that you can't pay. The example I keep giving all the time was, when the Ravens defense was coming into its own in the second version of that Ravens defense. And it was like, okay, we've got Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and Terrell Suggs and Bart Scott and Adalys Thomas, and all these guys kept blowing up. And it was like, well, who can we keep? And it was like, all right, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, and Suggs, and Bart Scott left, and Adalys Thomas left, and you saw guys continue to have to be cycled out, and that's why your bench is so important. That's why your pipeline is so important. You have to get guys ahead of time to continue to develop them. And everybody likes to the Bean After Dark and Bean's a wizard and all that kind of stuff. His mettle is really going to be tested over the coming years because he's going to have to be creative in order to keep this team together and keep it viable going forward with, again, he's kind of shooting himself in the foot here because of how good he's been at drafting and bringing free agents in, and how good the coaching staff has been at developing players and getting them to raise their floors and raise their ceilings. We're really going to see what this Bills team can be in terms of how sustainable they are going forward. And now to rewind things and go backwards a little bit to the 2021 film of Mr. Dawson Knox. I love that the first play that we've got queued up is a blocking play because I don't think I'm downplaying it, but I recognize everything he did with his receiving touchdowns and the big plays and the deep targets and what his speed and athleticism is. My favorite thing from Dawson Knox in 2021 was his blocking. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't think he was going to be bad at it, but the jump that he made was very legitimate, very noticeable. He functioned in a lot of ways. This was my number one thing from Dawson Knox in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that, coming out, he played at Ole Miss, and he was in the backfield a little bit as kind of in that sniffer role. He was in the slot a bunch, and it was the biggest question with him. Obviously, he was a very raw, athletic tight end coming out of college, but his physicality and blocking were really probably the biggest question mark coming to the next level because he just didn't do much of it at the collegiate level. So I think I'm right there with you. Watching his development as a blocker has been the most satisfying thing, especially when we talk about inline blocking, like on this first play and some of the plays that we have queued up, but also, going forward, if the Bills put him in line, with this system that Dorsey's implementing, and Aaron Cromer is going to start teaching some of the blocking things that he implemented over the different locations and teams that he's been on. It's exciting to think about how far Dawson Knox has come, but also where that, what's next when we're talking about his blocking level.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting to see what he has been and then what he's going to become. That's definitely the arc that we're always talking about. And we talked about it earlier in this episode about how slow it usually is for tight ends to develop in this league. It takes a lot because you have to catch like a wide receiver and you have to block like an offensive lineman. There's two positions that you're learning there. So you got to mend it all together and it takes some time. But you can see on this play, you see him shoot out of his stance and just move space, create space for this run. And that's really the exciting part, because I think the biggest thing with him, the whole time, he was always physical. He was always athletic, but he had to get the mental part of things correct before he could implement those physical gifts that he has. And you can see him doing that on this play. He's assignment sound. He gets right into his man. He gets into him early and creates space for this run for Devin Singletary.
Yeah, and this was a big play, guys. This was 3rd and 1 against the Patriots, obviously at home. You see the offensive line has everyone in the box. And then, yeah, you're right. Like, he gets, really good pad level, fires out, and then just watch him, like, look where the edge of the defensive line is, where that, edge and perimeter is set. And then watch him just collapse that guy down, Jamie Collins, and then Motor's able to hit it and get the first down. That's what we wanted to see from him. Again, in line, especially. And here's another one, Ant. Here's one. He's in line, but, one of the things that he does really well is get out in the space. Specifically, you see it on the second level block. And honestly, we could have watched a clinic on Dawson Knox's blocking just from this game. And I think we did break down a bunch of the plays, Anthony, during the year. But this play from him and how he's able to dig out Deion Jones, number 45, is just amazing. You see him physical, initiate that contact, and then just turn him, and the running back gets up inside on that play, Anthony.
This is something that, again, I wasn't expecting this from his game in 2021. He was in line 37.6% of the time. So almost, 4 out of every 10 he was there. And so you need him to be functional here. And the first one, he crashes down on an end and wipes him out and washes him down. This one is real nice. Because you see some of that functional athleticism that we laud him for in the passing game and in his receiving game. You see it show up here in the run game. He climbs to the second level quickly. You see him initiate contact. You see the physicality. And then here comes the technique, right? That first clip was more of the physicality and the nastiness. This one is the physicality, but also with the technique. And Erik, you hit it right off the bat. He gets his hands into the body of Deion Jones and he turns him. There's nothing more beautiful when you are a running back. Erik, this is a former running back, myself included. When you get to cut into a hole and you have the backside of a blocker like on the interior for you, that defender is completely shielded off. They got no chance. Like, this one was real nice again, because you see that athleticism show up, the physicality show up, and then you see the technique. He's blending multiple pieces together in the run game, which is why he had such a successful year, because he's able to win in multiple ways when it comes to his blocking.
Yeah, and here's another one, Kendall, again, from the Falcons game on Deion Jones, who, again, let's put it in perspective, because I know Anthony and I gushed over the Falcons linebacking unit when this game unfolded in the film room. And Lua Khan and Deion Jones are two really good linebackers at the NFL level. And especially when we're talking athleticism, getting in space. And on this play, Dawson Knox does a great job, again, getting to that second level, locking on, and then just wiping Deion Jones out of the play, taking him against his will, and then that allows Motor Singletary to take the will of this safety right on the numbers.
Yep, that's the key there. That's the key. How quickly he gets to the second level, and he allows Singletary to make what I would argue, and most people would probably argue, his most memorable run of the season. It was freed up by Dawson Knox getting to the second level, flushing out that linebacker and allowing Singletary to hit the safety. And it's really huge because you can see it at the beginning of the play. I talked about it earlier. This is assignment sound too, because there is a guy on the outside of him. He knows this is not his responsibility. There's no reason to even think about that, man. You have pullers behind you that's going to clear that out. He gets quickly up to the second level. Good aiming point. He blocks him off. His hips are turned to make sure that he doesn't get leverage to the sideline. He makes sure that he's in front of him, and it clears that lane for Devin Singletary to lower that shoulder, which we rarely see him do, but boy, he really did it on this one.
Yeah, that was that's one we definitely replayed several times in the film room during the season.
How could you not?
You're right, man. Dawson Knox in space, keeping his feet moving, staying locked on was was a key play on that. Now, this is like we talked about Gabriel Davis and Dawson Knox as blockers and their impact. Both of these guys are really good at setting the edge on these crack tosses, on the QB sweeps. And it's really the most important block. It really sets the alley, the width of the alley. And this is Josh Allen. It's a QB keeper off the right-hand side here. But we're seeing the crack block by Dawson Knox on Chris Jones. And look at what he does to Chris Jones. Just wipes him out. Again, creating that. Now, look at that void. Look at all that room in the middle of the field there. Now that Allen can, again, kind of set up his blocks and get upfield to get the first down, Anthony. This is just a great blocking and setting the edge for the offense on this play.
And it not only sets the edge, but it gets you mismatches out in space for your offensive line. So he takes out Chris Jones, and now you've got Mitch Morse against Daniel Sorensen, which is a mismatch every single day of the week. And Erik, this is something that this was the part of the year when what we were doing for the film room was coming up with not narratives, but like game plans for the opponents that the Bills were playing. We did it for the New England game. And we talked about Kansas City towards the end of the year. One of the things we talked about was how to attack them in the run game and how Chris Jones doesn't necessarily fire out of his stance. He doesn't come upfield hard all the time on run plays. Dawson, no, exactly. And Dawson Knox takes advantage of this, catches him right off the bat. He's got the element of surprise. He's got leverage. He doesn't even have to hit him that hard. He just takes him out of the play. And he's done. Gets on the inside shoulder there, boom, pops him out. You get Mitch Morse out in space, which is something the Bills should try and do as much as possible because he's one of the most athletic centers and one of the best centers out in space. Yes, we damn sure approve. And the Prince of Pop sets, Mitch Morse. You get him out in space against a linebacker or a corner or a safety. Even if Allen could have cut this outside instead and taken advantage of Spencer Brown being out there as well. Like with the athleticism the Bills have on their offensive line now, when you've got a tight end that can function like that on the edge, it creates more mismatches in space for your O-line.
Yeah, and here's the same play, red zone against the Falcons. Now I want you to watch this one. I talked about setting the width of that alley and that gap on these crack blocks on the QB sweeps. Watch how Dawson Knox eliminates the down defensive lineman right over where McKenzie is. Watch him cave that dude and just throws him across the field, almost all the way to where the center had lined up. Just a great block, a physical block at the point of attack, and Josh Allen was able to run it in there.
Yeah, you got to be quick off the snap on those crackback blocks. You got to be quick. Make sure you get to that outside shoulder quickly, flush him back inside, and allow that play to get outside where it's meant to be. And he does it on both of those plays. It's a very subtle and quick move, but when it's done correctly, it opens a lot of space for the runner.
Yeah, and so, we're done with the blocking portion of it. And really, what, as a receiver and the athleticism of Knox, it really starts with, we always see his angry runs. He's always on those
the juggernauts.
Segments. Yeah. And what he does with the ball in his hands, it's partly why we're super excited about him in this offense with Dorsey and again Cromer. And I'm always going to bring him up because the play action, those slide routes, those just little out routes, getting the ball in the hands of Dawson Knox. This was one of those plays, guys, where they got the ball again in the red zone into Knox's hands. And he does the rest. He's running a little slide route from right to left on your screen. Josh Allen fakes it, gets him the ball, and you can see him at full speed. You can see my boy Gabriel Davis out there blocking as well. You get, again, a man on a man, and then you get Knox matched up with the safety coming from depth, and you see the speed threaten Marcus Williams out wide, and then Knox is able to cut it back upfield to get in for the touchdown.
I love how this play is like really great for Dawson Knox, but it's also really great for Gabriel Davis because Gabriel Davis's block like really helps make this touchdown, like how he gets into his man and drives him downfield. But, to focus on Knox, this is one of those plays that it shows up as a, like a 9-yard or 11-yard touchdown for Josh Allen. And it's really a 10-yard catch and run touchdown for Dawson Knox, and Josh Allen threw it a yard, and Dawson Knox took advantage and just breaks arm tackles, gets low. That's the type of benefit that you want for your quarterback, whether it's a young quarterback, a veteran quarterback, and their prime quarterback, whatever. If you can dump the ball down to someone and they can use their athleticism or physicality or speed and just get you yards just by getting the ball simply into their hands, that's a really nice matchup piece. And it's nice usually when you have it in your receivers or your running backs, but if you have it in a tight end, again, there's that mismatch potential, that chess piece potential. And this is kind of old hat for Dawson Knox at this point, just making moves in space and being physical and showing that athleticism and physicality at the same time. Something that we highlighted earlier in this episode in the run game, but here you see it in the passing game with the ball in his hands. And he's been consistently doing this since his rookie year.
Erik, can I actually just add on that last one?
Yeah.
I really want to see the Bills do this action more. I feel like we see the Dolphins do this a lot where you have that slide route and it's coming off of a zone going the opposite direction, and it freezes that outside defender because you don't know if that's a split zone blocker or if that's a slide route. And I want to see that action more because it puts that defender in conflict so heavily, and it creates space. You can see that outside defender on the left. He has to play that edge. He has to set the edge of the run there, because if Knox is blocking him, it creates a cutback lane where the running back is one-on-one with Demario Davis there on a cutback. Obviously, the linemen are going very, very wide on this play, so it kind of takes the split zone out of play a little bit more than it probably would have if they were going upfield a little bit more. But either way, I love this action. We see the Dolphins do it a ton, and I want to see the Bills implement it.
And in many ways, guys, this is a hybrid type look of, a wide zone run, but also a screen, really, because this is really just a screen. It's you have Davis out there. He's not running a route. He's immediately going into blocking mode, and you're just throwing that slide route. But again, this guy's totally unblocked. 96 is unblocked. Demario Davis, 56, is just standing there. They're not sure what's happening. Is he handing it off? Are they running zone read? You got, again, that split flow coming across. That number 96 doesn't know whether to fall into his run fit off the butt of Dawkins there,
right,
or attack the running back if it's zone read. He really doesn't know. It's a very great point. And next thing you know, again, Dawson Knox, full speed, out the front door there, and in there, smells the end zone.
There's so many things you have to honor there, like the run of Singletary, the run of Josh Allen, and then the pass. Like, there's so many things you have to account for in a split second that it's kind of paralysis by analysis, and you're sitting there trying to diagnose, and then somebody just goes flying by you, like Dawson Knox. And then by design, like that's an advantage in the open field. Dawson Knox one-on-one with a safety, or really anybody in the secondary, is advantage Dawson Knox every day. Unless Brian Dawkins came back, it's advantage Dawson Knox in the open field every time versus any safety, any corner.
Right. And that's the thing with, we talked about at the top, whether they could sign Davis or Knox, and why a tight end who is, a top 5 tight end, top 10 tight end is so important. Because when you're talking personnel groupings, guys, it starts with the tight end. How many tight ends are in there? How many running backs are in there? Right. And that's how defenses game plan and strategize how to match up and counter what the offense is doing. And when you have a guy like Knox, he's tough to guard, because he does have a lot of wide receiver type abilities, but he's also got that size like a tight end. And the segue of how much of a mismatch Dawson Knox is, it starts right here. This is it right here. So this is Knox versus the linebacker from the Patriots. And so you can see to the top of the screen, they have 4 eligibles right there, but they're bringing a wide receiver across the formation. But what Brian Table does is he gets a one-on-one matchup with Dawson Knox on the linebacker of the Patriots, and Knox versus a single high coverage is running a deep over out, and Josh is able to find him. He works through his progressions to the bottom of the screen. 1, 2, Knox is number 3, and he's able to hit Dawson Knox as he runs away from that linebacker. That's exactly what Dawson Knox brings. He is a mismatch for linebackers in the NFL. You're going to see some safeties have troubles with him. You're going to see some corners have trouble with him. And on this play, watch the speed of Knox and how he separates from Jawan Bentley, number 8, the linebacker for the Patriots.
Yeah, that's the key to this play, really identifying the mismatch. Obviously, Dable getting the mismatch, getting them 1v1 on each other, and then Josh Allen identifying it. This has been a deficiency for the Patriots, not just the linebacker position, but specifically speed at the linebacker's position.
Yes.
So this is exactly how you exploit it. You get man coverage, you get the deep over route. Josh Allen sees it, and he's got to trust the athleticism of his man. I almost wish that Knox knew how separated he was from the defender, because he came back and worked back through the football and kind of got rid of some possible rack from that. But it was slightly, I don't even want to say he was underthrown. He made the catch
flat. Josh
Josh
he threw him flat and allowed him to separate more
upfield.
horizontally
Right.
more than vertically.
Yeah, rather than
right.
upfield.
Right. So I put that more on Josh, but he's a mismatch, guys. And
Exactly.
It's been so much fun to see how he's built that confidence. I asked Poyer about Knox and what he's seen in his development. He goes, he's just trusting his body more. He's trusting how big he is. He's trusting how fast he is. He's trusting how strong he is. And he's starting to see that confidence in Knox and that development over the last few years. And here's another. I mean, honestly, Anthony, this really should be your game, because this game against the Washington football team had some of your best plays from the season. So you see Dawson Knox to the bottom of the screen. And one thing that we talked about offline is how far Knox has come in contested catch situations, right, guys? Like his ability to make catches with guys draped over him, guys in his pocket in trail technique. Here's one-on-one matchup, Knox versus the linebacker of the Washington football team. And Josh Allen's just going to throw it up for him. And Knox is going to separate late with a nice little subtle push off, but then the body control to bring it in for the touchdown against the Washington football team.
Yeah, I love this play. We showed so many, whether blocking or receiving, clips from Knox to this point of him in an inline alignment. And here he's lined up out wide, which he did 12.9% of the time in 2021. But this is such a nice mismatch piece. Like he lines up outside. Holcomb is lined up, head up on him. Holcomb's a linebacker. You know, Holcomb's actually a decent cover linebacker, especially. Yes. Yeah, he can move. He can do some things. He actually played pretty well in this game, especially in the red zone. But this is the advantage of having a chess piece like that. This is pure mismatch, almost no matter what linebacker he's going to come against. And then Erik, you nailed it. Knox gets his head around early on this route, gets his eyes on Josh Allen, gets his eyes on the ball, and then you see the athleticism and you see the physicality and everything we've shown so far, and you see it a bit on this one, but there's nuance to this, right? The pacing of when he turns, what he does. And Erik, this is something that we talked about last year and something that we talked about offline. One of the things he mentioned when he went to what's the tight end U with Travis Kelce and them last year, he talked about pacing his routes a little more, not running routes at full speed and having different levels and gears. You see a bit of that pacing here. You see him, he doesn't just sell out and go full tilt or turn too early. You see him turn his head around, make eye contact, and I love where you got this screenshot. He's got his hands, but he doesn't fully extend to the point where he can draw an offensive pass interference. He uses his hands to maintain that separation and then get clean. And he doesn't extend, but he keeps Holcomb at bay and then just releases. Exactly. So when he lets go, he has that separation. And then you see the athleticism finish it, right? Almost a full extension, back shoulder catch, really nice. And this is what we've come to see. Like, he might drop a wide open, easy one, but he's going to catch all the hard, difficult ones. Like, for some reason, nice fingertip catch. Like, it's so odd how that seems to have been his track record. But again, nuance, athleticism, physicality, a lot of pieces that he continues to tie together in a variety of ways. And this one was nice because that play right there is nice because it shows what you can do and what kind of chess piece and advantage and plus matchup he is. But it also shows him playing tight end. He's not just being a complete athlete or an overly physical guy. He's playing tight end and combining his strengths and traits into playing that position.
Right. We're going to see another contested catch up the seam here versus a safety. But I want to kind of put in perspective, like, how far he's come in that department. So in 2020, he had a 33.3% contested catch rate. In 2021, it was 58.8%. So again, he's starting to build that confidence. And then, of course, Josh Allen's obviously going to trust Knox. He's done that for years, even when he was dropping a lot of these passes. But that's the thing. Like, we haven't talked about that. His drop rate, he's gotten better in that department. By all means, he still can improve in that area. But I do think that he's come a long way in that department. But he's at the very least, up the floor of his hands and catching. He's definitely been more consistent. He was in 2021. Hopefully he can continue to improve in that area. If there's one area that he can still improve, that definitely is one of them.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair.
So again, here's that contested catch up the seam here against the Colts. Again, working versus a safety and late, again, kind of separating late with that physicality and then going up and getting the ball along the sideline, along the boundary with the flags on the field. So you see Josh Allen trust him on this throw it up there, and Knox is able to reel it in.
Hey, you just said it. He's converting contested catches at 58%. It's no longer a 50-50 ball anymore when you're throwing to Dawson Knox. So you got to give him a chance. I think the really cool part with Dawson Knox, especially in those last two plays, is you can see him using the physicality on these contested catches. He doesn't get bothered during the stem of his route as he's trying to get it outside of the numbers, in between the numbers and the sideline. He's getting jammed a little bit. You know, the safety's getting physical with him, but because of Knox's stature, his build, his athleticism, he works right through all of that contact, stacks the safety, gets behind him, and then ultimately makes a great play on the football.
Yeah, that's that contested catch rate was something that just popped out when I was looking at some of the stats for him. Definitely an area. We saw a lot of those RPOs in the red zone, those quick hitters for touchdowns.
Yeah.
Safeties are right over the top of him, and he's still able to, shield the ball as it's coming in there. Again, on a line from Josh Allen on a lot of these RPOs and slants, and he's able to reel it in. And the last play is against the Patriots, where you're going to see him against J.C. Jackson. So this is one of the top plays from last year when we're talking about concepts. It's one of their most efficient concepts, where you have Josh Allen, faking the run there. He hides the ball from the defense, and then Knox is kind of leaking out down the field. You see him in trail is J.C. Jackson down the field. And again, Josh throws it on the run. We talked about those big plays down the field. It's a little flat, though. The trajectory is not up and over J.C. Jackson, but watch the hand-eye coordination from Dawson Knox on this play. And talk about contested catches. That's one of the best corners in the league. His hands right in the frame, basically in the pocket of Dawson Knox, and he's able to reel this in. This is a hell of a catch, maybe one of his better catches from last year.
This play is like a crossover with last week's episode of how Josh Allen uses evasion tactics to make big plays. So well done. The end is the cherry on top. For me, this play starts at the line of scrimmage. Obviously, that's where the plays start, but that's my favorite spot. The release off the line. I love how he takes that jump step inside. Look where his head is. He is boom. He is eyeing up Donta Hightower, which makes the defender, I believe that's Duggar, head up on him. He's reading Knox. So he sees what Knox does. He comes forward to sell out for run because he's also reading through Knox to the backfield. So he sees what Knox does. He sees the run action. He comes forward, psych. And then you see J.C. Jackson. He's in such trail because he was also reading run on the outside based on what Knox was doing and based on the run action he sees. So everything that Knox does at the line of scrimmage sets him up for success. And then once he gets in the open field, it's the athleticism, it's the speed, it's the hands, and you nailed it. Like what he does with the extension on this play, this isn't, again, not to knock Josh, like he could have put a little more air on it or could have let it more upfield. Exactly. And if you guys were looking at it from the sideline angle, Knox has like a good 5 yards of separation between him and Jackson. If Allen could have gotten this deep, it's a walk-in touchdown. But Knox slows down for it a little bit, but that's cool. Bail out your quarterback, make a play, and you said it. Jackson recovers actually decently nice here. He's still able to try and make a play on the ball. Knox could have lost this ball in the lights. He could have lost it when Jackson jumps in front of him. Jackson could have changed the angle, got a piece, but Knox comes to it. He snatches it out of the air. He makes a nice hands catch. He makes an aggressive play on the ball to go up and get it and make a play. And that's something that we saw consistently from him downfield and why he was so successful in that area this year with Josh Allen, because of him using that size and speed and athleticism and aggression in the air to go up and take the ball away from defenders like we saw in the previous clip and also like we saw here.
Yeah, that was it was just cool to go back and watch obviously some of his clips and his blocking and how far he's come as a receiver as well. And then the different matchups that teams, tried throwing corners on him. Teams tried throwing safeties on him. The Patriots, especially, obviously, they're in the division. They saw the Bills a bunch last year. But how they pretty much eventually, like after, you saw Bentley get used there, they were like, Duggar, you're going to be on Knox the entire game. Yeah. And then, it's Dable and that offense getting in the heads of the Patriots. It happened week in and week out, though, because of Dawson Knox and how athletic he is.
Yeah, he's a chess piece. He's someone that's going to force you to stress your imagination. How are we going to guard him? A linebacker's probably too slow. A safety might be good in terms of size, but he might actually be too small. And then a cornerback's not going to be physical enough. So you kind of have to find that sweet spot when you're finding your matchup against Dawson Knox, and it makes it really difficult to defend him.
Yeah, that's the whole piece, right? Like do you want to use a linebacker? Okay, there's disadvantages to that. Do you want to use a corner? Okay, there's disadvantages to that. Like, and then usually you're like we saw in the Atlanta game, right? You're faster, more off-ball linebackers like the Deion Joneses and the Luakons of the world. Like, do they have the physicality and the kind of the toughness to go toe-to-toe with him? And then the guys that do have the physicality and the toughness, like a Jawan Bentley, they don't have the speed or the wheels to stick with Dawson Knox. And that's where that mismatch piece comes in, let alone with concepts and play action and what you can do with different looks in a variety of ways. And his 2021 was very encouraging for Dawson Knox. And obviously part of this episode is kind of, projecting what he'll be in the future and with eyes on this 2022 season. And Erik, we'll kick it to you first. What do you expect from Dawson Knox this year in 2022, whether it's his usage or his game, or what area you think he'll progress in? What do you think, when we sit down and review this season really at the end, what do you think will be the takeaway point from Dawson Knox's game in 2022?
I'm excited about him in the play action game. Again, I think it's something the Bills need to use more. Kendall, you talked about it on that touchdown against the Saints, getting Knox the ball on those slide routes, whether, it's from when the quarterback's under center on those rollouts or those half rolls, getting him the ball on those underneath routes. Because one thing, when I looked back at when Aaron Kromer and the LA Rams offense, when he was there in 2020 and those years before, and they run that heavy boot action, with Sean McVay, their tight ends did a lot of their damage in the short area, middle of the field.
Yep.
And so I want to see, Knox kind of attack that area a little more, because now Cole Beasley, who obviously lived in that area, is not there. Yes, they have Jamison Crowder. Yes, they have Diggs and Davis who can do some work in there, but they need Dawson Knox because of who he is now and the respect he gets to eat up the middle of the field in that short area. You can see, according to Pro Football Focus, he only had 46 yards there on 7 catches in the middle of the field from 0 to 9 yards. If they can get him the ball underneath, whether it's, again, on some slide routes, on some curl routes or stop routes, on some shallow drags when he's running full speed, get him on the move, get him some yards after the catch. That's where I'm excited to see Dawson Knox even have a bigger impact, aside from, what we've talked about with the run game and his blocking. I want to see him, concentrate a little more, because he's phenomenal in that intermediate area. That's obviously where Josh loves. That's his sweet spot. Josh's sweet spot's over 10 yards, but under 20. Well, he's actually over 20 now. He's really good over 20 yards now too. But his sweet spot is that, that third level. And I think that Dawson Knox is good there too. But I want to see him do more in that underneath area and break some more tackles with the ball in his hand in that underneath area from 0 to 9 yards.
No, I love that. I love that answer. Yeah, because everything, especially last year when we talk about Dawson Knox, like there were a lot of times last year where he was the check down option, and you give it to him and you just let him make a play. Like he's just really tough to tackle. So I love that answer. And in the play action game, it is a really easy way to manufacture that. For me specifically, I think I'm expecting and hoping for growth as a blocker, because I'm expecting and hoping for more 12 personnel. I think it's going to force him to be used as a blocking tight end more than he probably has been to this point in his career. So I'm excited to see the growth in that regard. And stemming off of what you said, Erik, more 12 personnel probably would call for some more play action. So I'm really excited to see him sneak out and get out of those plays in that way. He's the guy that you're not suspecting to leak out of plays, and then he's just wide open on the back end of plays, stuff like that, but mainly as a blocker, because I think they're intending to use the offense in that way a little bit more this year.
Yeah, I love that. That's, I've got two, really, it starts with the scheme fit piece. You guys both talked about it and hit on it. That 12 personnel piece, Erik, we did that film room review of game 1 against the Jets last year for the Bills, and how the Bills came out in 12 personnel to force the Jets out of 2 high and make them go with single high looks. And they just took advantage of it time and time again. And in a world where NFL defenses are using more 2 high pre-snap, but also post-snap, especially against the Buffalo Bills, going with those 12 personnel looks, if you can afford it, allows you to really start to dictate to the defense a little bit and take it to them in a variety of ways. And Knox's chess piece ability within that is made for it based on what we've showed in this episode and based on what you guys spoke about. And I'm also interested in seeing what he does against zone, some of his man zone splits, which I found interesting. So with some numbers here. So of tight ends that had at least 10 targets last year, which there were 34 of those tight ends, he had the fourth highest target percentage versus man coverage, but he had the lowest target percentage versus zone coverage. He was 9th in average depth of target versus man and 24th versus zone. His average depth of target versus man was 10.3, zone was 6.1. Erik, like you mentioned, like with the absence of Cole Beasley, how much does Jamison Crowder fill into that role, or Isaiah McKenzie or Khalil Shakir? Or if there is more 12 personnel, and even if there's not, does Dawson Knox fit into that role? And what is his usage in these schemes that we're going to start to see where defenses, again, are going to continue to use zone against the Buffalo Bills like they did last year to try and keep everything in front of them, rally and tackle to the choke point. Very interested to see what he does as the Bills continue to evolve versus how defenses are starting to play them.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because when we did that Jets episode with Feely and we talked about using more 12 and having those single high looks come from the defense, that does open up play action, but more importantly, it opens up the seams. Yes. That opens up the seams for those big tight ends, whether it's OJ Howard or Dawson Knox. And I think that's where that hasn't really been Josh Allen's forte, his strength. His throws down the seam, which require more touch, have been few and far between. It's not a weekly occurrence, but again, the Bills hadn't seen a lot of single high looks. So we need to see some of those single high looks. And for Josh to hit it like he did against the Buccaneers to the short side of the field, he threw it up and over there for a touchdown during that comeback. So I would like to see them, work the seams a little more. We saw some practice video, I believe it was last week, of them working their tight ends up the seam. It was Gilliam, OJ Howard running up the seam at the field house. So it's something that, again, I think they're working on, and that they're expecting defenses to maybe, again, match up in that way when they go to 12 personnel. So that'll be interesting to see. I like this question from Jason Taylor, because a lot of people immediately think that Howard is the better blocker right now because of Howard, the prospect, when he was coming out of Alabama, was legendary when it came to blocking. He was, and then the guy after him, Hawkinson, was another guy. Like, it's one thing that as, college prospects come out, we love tight ends that are awesome blockers, but also athletic. I don't know, Jason, if Howard is better than Knox right now as a blocker. I hadn't seen it from a physical standpoint the last couple of years. Of course, injuries do play a part in that, but I haven't seen the consistency or the domination, for that matter, that OJ Howard was as a blocker coming out of Alabama.
No, I think it's a fair point. There's a lot to like with OJ Howard, and I'm excited for his addition onto this team as a number 2 tight end, because whether it's his receiving ability, whether it's his blocking ability, and granted, Erik, like you said, like injuries have played a role in that. He hasn't come close to, and maybe this is because of the bar that was set for him, but he hasn't come close to the potential and the ceiling that was kind of bestowed upon him coming out of Alabama. He was the guy who he wasn't Kyle Pitts level coming out, but he was one of those guys that was like the next breed of changing level tight end. Like, he was supposed to be one of those guys who was going to revolutionize the position based on what he did at Alabama. People saw him in the Natty against Clemson, getting that ball in the flat wide open and just juicing it up the sideline against the defense filled with studs and speed and outrunning everybody. And he was supposed to be the second coming of this tight end revolution, and it just didn't pan out. I would second that notion. I think Knox is better than Howard in every area of tight end right now, and that doesn't mean that Howard can't raise his game up and reach that potential. I'm very excited to see what, I think our favorite Bills addition this offseason, Coach Aaron Kromer. I'm excited to see what Howard looks like when Kromer gets his hooks into him from a blocking perspective. We still see, granted, Kupp deserves a lot of the credit himself, but we've seen a lot of Coach Kromer's fundamentals and what Cooper Kupp is still doing to this day over there in Los Angeles. So I'm very excited to see what Kromer can do with a ball of clay that really Howard still is, because he's still kind of green from an experience perspective with how much time he's missed because of injury, but he's still got the size. He's still got the mentality. He's got those physical intangibles, so he could raise that game up. But as of right now, I would second that with Knox as well being overall better.
Yeah, I'll third it. I think it's fair to say that there's, things that are still on the table for OJ Howard. And I think, Anthony, like you put it, you're excited about him being tight end too. And that's how I feel. I'm very excited about his place in the Buffalo Bills roster and depth chart. I think it's really good for him and his career growth, because I think he still has that potential, but he's been stuffed on a weird depth chart on the Bucs, and it's been tough for him to get playing time. And for whatever reason, the quarterbacks don't like him. He's been injured, whatever it's been. Now he gets a chance. He gets a chance to reclaim his potential, whatever percentage of that potential that he can reclaim. Good on him, because I think he really has a good shot to do it this year at tight end too, in a good system.
It's going to be fun, the addition of OJ Howard to that tight end room. And when you've got a guy with high upside and potential still present like OJ Howard, paired with a tight end one like Dawson Knox, who has significantly raised his floor, but still has that high ceiling present, it's a fun position grouping for this Buffalo Bills team, and one that I'm sure as we go throughout the preseason and regular season, we will be highlighting regularly here in the Cover One Film Room. But for this episode of the Cover One Film Room, focusing on Dawson Knox and his development in the 2021 season, that's going to do it for us here in this episode. I want to thank everybody who joined us live on this episode. The questions, thoughts, comments, philosophies, theories, maxims, concerns, everything like that you guys threw up into the chat. Always welcome, always appreciated from myself, Kendall, and Erik, and the entire Cover One team, and just watching you guys engage with each other in the chat and with us.
That's awesome.
It's awesome. It's something that we tremendously appreciate. So thank you to those of you who joined us live. If you didn't join us live and you are watching later or listening later on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms, thank you very much for your view, your listen, your download, whatever have you. If you are watching here on YouTube now or later, please drop a like on this video. It's been said multiple times in the chat. We appreciate you guys supporting us that way in the chat. And again, say it every week, and I say this, that I say it every week. I know it's corny, but the likes go a long way towards helping us to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. If you are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever podcasting app, please drop a review or a rating. Subscribe to the Cover One Film Room and to the Cover One channel as a whole on any one of the podcasting apps and YouTube. We have you covered every single day of the week when it comes to anything and everything Buffalo Bills and general football knowledge and content. We aim to make you guys as the best versions of yourselves as fans when it comes to anything and everything Buffalo Bills and football, and trying to tie in that educational piece and the X's and O's and the hows and the whys. We appreciate you guys appreciating us, and that'll do it. For myself, Anthony Prohaska, for Mr. Erik Turner and Mr. Kendall Mursky, we are the Cover One Film Room. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We will see you next week, and as always, go Bills.